Greetings, friends and citizens of the world. This is Brother Bart's Conspiracy Corner News. I am Bart Sibrel. What I'm going to do today, because I don't know through what devices everyone out there is listening to this broadcast, I assume that a lot of people may be walking around or driving while they're listening. Therefore, I'm going to basically read an article that I wrote. There won't be any video clips except at the very beginning of my article. Now, it's a very important video clip. It lasts about 15-20 minutes, and it's of a documentary that the Weather Channel removed from their uploads, okay? You can't get it anywhere that I'm aware of. And so someone recorded it at the time. We spent a lot of time, not me, but a good friend, putting this together and transferring it to the best quality possible. That video at the end of the article I'm about to read is very important, so be sure when you see or hear the video article being introduced or the documentary at the end, be sure to go back to your screen. We'll make it full screen and you'll be able to watch what I'm talking about. This is an article and a subject I've been working on for about 20 years. When I first came upon the controversy of the moon fraud, I spoke with an executive at NASA. It was the late 80s, I think somewhere around 1989. And they said, yes, the moon landings are fake, and a lot of us here know that, including shuttle astronauts, and we just don't say anything about it to keep our jobs. And then he said, oh, and by the way, we consider, the fake moon landing old news. What you really should be doing a film about is this particular topic that I'm mentioning here. And it is about Planet X. And he told me that Planet X is real and that it was coming sometime in the early part of the 21st century. Now, there's, 20 years so far into the 21st century and 80 to go. He said in the early part of the 21st century. Now, before we get started, I want to say that I have a new sponsor for this channel. As you know, YouTube took my ad revenue away about 2 years ago, the very next day after I criticized them. SGT report had their monetization took away. I came to their defense and said, that's wrong. And the very next day, my monetization was turned off as well. So, what a coincidence. And that was the only time I ever spoke anything negative about YouTube. Now, maybe I shouldn't have bitten the hand that fed me. Nevertheless, it happened. So, SGT report has passed on to me information about who sponsors their channel, and hopefully I can support myself. Sometimes I spend 20 hours a week preparing and researching each week's presentation. So, this provides a little compensation for that. This is a survival subject we're about to get into, and this is my Patriot Supply. Even though the heading up here is a little bit different, the actual website is simply called preparewithbart.com, and there'll be a link under the description, under this video, right underneath my traditional, donate button is the link to this. By being a new sponsor for this program, people who click on it can save up to $100 today on their first order. All the links will be for this simply in the description of this video. It's simply preparewithbart.com. I get a commission and off of their sales. And their sales, what they have is, a lot of survival food that's compact, can be rehydrated and things like that. And, this is basically their supply. So they're my new sponsor of this program, My Patriot Supply Store. And the website officially linked in the description of this video. If you go under and open it up right beneath the donate button, you use a link and it basically says preparewithbart.com. It takes you to here, and that's how I get a commission. Make sure when you go back to My Patriot Supply, you always come to my videos. They'll be posted under each video from now and in the future to use that link to shop with them. If you don't use my link, I don't get a commission. You're not helping me out any, but you're helping them out, and they look like really good people. And so, seeing how we have a survival subject coming up, I figured perfect opportunity to mention my new sponsor, which sells survival food, supplies, things like that. So let's get right into the article. I recently published this on Natural News blogs. Natural News, run by Mike Adams, is a very good website. Not only does it talk about the secrets of natural health and how the pharmaceutical industry is, one of the biggest criminal enterprises on earth, if not the biggest. He also has very good alternative media points of view on things. And so, naturally, I started writing for them, have written a few articles, and this is my latest article. Now, because I have ad blocker, even though it's turned off, there's no image here, but when you click on this article, which will be linked in the description of this video if you want to reread it, the image will appear. And the title is Planet X God's End Time Tribulation? And let's just get into it. I'll be reading this article. It'll take a few minutes. And at the end of it, there will be a very important video about rogue planets. Planet X, that was actually removed from the Weather Channel's lineup because I guess, they didn't want it out there, which makes you think maybe there's some truth to this, what I'm about to read. Now, here's a scripture from Matthew 24 out of Jesus' own mouth. He said, "In the last days, there will be a great tribulation, unequaled in all of world history. Unless those days are shortened, no one will survive." That's Matthew 24, 21 through 22. Many people suspect that some sort of tribulation is headed our way. Economic, political, or geological are some of the best guesses. What if the global trial that is anticipated encompasses all of these at the very same time? An unprecedented simultaneous combination of all of these disasters would indeed make such a cataclysm unequaled in all of world history. The outer planets of our solar system, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, were each successively discovered by observing the it's a tough word for me, perturbations or gravitational deviations of the next closest known planet to them. That is to say, the existence of a yet discovered planet in our solar system, more remote than the farthest one from the sun presently known at any given time in history, was discovered by studying the unusual gravitational motions of the farthest known planet, which indicated that at least one more planet was beyond it. Saturn had deviations in its orbit indicating that Uranus existed beyond it, even though Uranus was not actually seen until 150 years later. When Uranus was finally discovered, its orbital path deviations likewise indicated that Neptune existed beyond it, even though Neptune did not become visible until many decades later. When Pluto was discovered in 1930, it too gave evidence that another, much larger body was beyond it. Shortly after this, the term Planet X came to light to best describe this yet-to-be-seen, mysterious, large, heavenly object at the edge of our solar system. My military sources inform me that it was sometime during President Eisenhower's second term, 1957 through 1960, that his leading scientists confirmed the existence of Planet X by using specialized radio telescopes, which are still classified to this day. The Pioneer 10, 1972, and Voyager 1 and 2, 1977, unmanned space probes were all specifically designed with their primary purpose being to triangulate the precise location and trajectory of Planet X. In early press releases of these probes, NASA even mentioned this as the purpose for their mission, though they never mentioned this ever again and deleted all known references of it from their files. The New York Times even published a story about these same NASA space probes having successfully discovered Planet X in 1981. Yet, there was no additional article from them of the mysterious Planet X ever again. 2 years later, in 1983, the Washington Post also reported that Planet X had been discovered, this time by a newly launched infrared satellite telescope. Yet they, too, never published a story about Planet X ever again. In 1990, the chief astronomer for the United States, Dr. Robert S. Harrington of the Naval Observatory, announced with certainty the approach of Planet X into our inner solar system, crossing the very orbit of Earth. And then after his death, he was replaced by a presidential appointee who never mentioned this controversial and alarming subject ever again. It seems like each new generation of scientists and journalists gets excited about the repeated rediscovery of Planet X, and then for some strange reason, they are asked or pressured not to talk about Planet X ever again. Why is this? What is the big secret? Why would the discovery of a new outer planet be such a taboo subject? Why indeed? I suspect the reason is because the powers that be want to keep this information to themselves in order to use it to their own advantage. The question then arises, why the secrecy if Planet X merely orbits the Sun in a normal fashion? This may mean that Planet X does not orbit the Sun in a normal fashion. What other kind of orbit is there? A highly elliptical one, like a comet, which may bring Planet X perilously close to the Earth in the near future. The question is, why is the government and the powers that be not telling the public about Planet X? And why would this secrecy be to their advantage? The so-called super-rich elite at the top of our societal pyramid, who are the ones who actually control the government, have long been on record saying that the world would be a much better place if 7.5 billion inferior people would just go away somehow. Perhaps not wanting to be the next historical genocidal villain, the powers that be are privately preparing their own bunkers, with plans of letting Mother Nature, Planet X, do their dirty work of population reduction for them. That is to say, if Planet X gets close enough to the Earth in the coming years, there would be so many global, cataclysmic, geological, and climate changes that unless you specifically prepared for them, you would not at all survive, unlike those in the know of Planet X's coming arrival. I was first told about Planet X by a high-ranking source at NASA in 1989, more than 30 years ago. They said that Planet X might make a dangerously close approach to the Earth sometime in the first half of the 21st century, and that I might still be alive to see it. In 1989, worrying about something several decades away was not one of my top priorities. Yet now, more than 20 years into the 21st century, the long-ago warning of Planet X is reappearing in my mind. As Planet X is estimated to be 7 times larger than the Earth, its dramatic gravitational effects would cause apocalyptic disasters upon our entire planet, even if its closest approach was a distant 600 million miles away. Even at this great distance, if Planet X's closest approach was somewhere between Jupiter and Saturn, Planet X would pull Jupiter further away from the Sun, which in turn would pull the Earth further away from the Sun, which would then wreak havoc on global Earth climate to the point of near total annihilation, with a dramatic increase in volcanoes, tidal waves, meteor showers, and earthquakes, all of which the scriptures foretell as happening at the end of time, just before the Messiah's return. Remember to watch for the Planet X documentary film that the Weather Channel put up and then removed, which is at the end of this article. Planet X is what astronomers call a rogue planet, which is one that freely floats through space, or has a highly eccentric orbit like a comet, rather than circling a star on the traditional elliptical plane. As noted in the Guardian article subtitled "Twice as Many Rogue Planets as Orbiting Ones," this would mean that there are 200 to 800 billion rogue planets in our home galaxy alone. Additionally, some believe that Planet X is pitch black and very cold, thus making it impossible to see through traditional optical telescopes until it is very close to the Earth and glows red as it nears our sun. By this time, preparation for it would likely be far too late. Only government officials, and the Vatican of all entities, have the required specialized infrared telescopes and satellites to observe Planet X, the equipment of which, I am told, was specifically designed for this highly confidential purpose. In fact, the most powerful optical telescope in the world, which also has the infrared capability to detect such a cold, non-reflective rogue planet is not only owned by the highly secretive Jesuit sect of the Vatican, which is their version of the CIA, it was mysteriously named by the papacy itself as the Lucifer Telescope. Why in the world would the supposed Christian papacy honor the world's best telescope with the name of Lucifer? I believe this is because the telescope was specifically designed to track Planet X, whose nickname is Lucifer, the destroyer. See John 10:10, as it may destroy most of the earth. Planet X was also nicknamed the Dragon in 1054 AD by Chinese astronomers during the previous passing because of its red color and wings of meteor storms on each side of it as it neared the sun. In fact, Malachi Martin, a Vatican Jesuit priest who disavowed the sworn secrecy of this sect just prior to his death, said this about the Lucifer Telescope's hidden purpose. The highest levels of the Vatican governance know what is approaching the earth, and it will be of the utmost importance in the coming years. Did you get that? A Jesuit priest, part of their CIA in the Vatican, on his deathbed, disavowed that organization and said the purpose of the Lucifer Telescope, which is in Arizona, the purpose is the following. The highest levels of the Vatican governance know what is approaching the earth, and it will be of the utmost importance in the coming years. And this is the purpose of the Lucifer Telescope, because I believe they are tracking planet Lucifer, Planet X, which may destroy most of the earth. In regard to Planet X playing a significant role in end-time events, as potentially God's chosen instrument to bring about the final Great Tribulation, there are basically two opinions on this matter. Those of a strictly scientific background who acknowledge the existence of Planet X and its potential for future Earth cataclysms, yet dismiss any scriptural references of such past occurrences or future prophetic fulfillment. And number two, those who are only religious, who disregard the scientific or historical evidence that such a rogue planet may have played in past secular or scriptural history, as well as disregarding any future geological or biblical prophetic events that may be caused by such. Personally, I think the most accurate perspective about this is one which includes both points of view, science and the scriptures. When these two perspectives are combined, this not only indicates Planet X's potential for causing the science-based forecasted events of upcoming worldwide geological catastrophes, which the scientific community acknowledges would result from a passing large rogue planet's intense gravity. This also includes prophetic fulfillment of numerous scriptural warnings of a time of trouble coming upon the whole world, which will be greater than at any other time in all of history. And, by the way, for an overview of scriptural references, you might check out the full chapters of Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Ezekiel 7, Joel 2, and Isaiah 13 and 24. In addition to this great documentary, only 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this presentation, just keep listening and watching and the video will start. In the link of the description of this video, there will be many references to all of these news articles that I'm talking about. So be sure, if you doubt anything that I'm saying, I can back it up with a list of sources as well. That'll be in the description of this video. Both Planet X scientists and end-time scriptural scholars, which I've interviewed, are predicting the exact same soon-coming events, which may be caused by a large approaching heavenly object, the rogue planet, Planet X. And this is, number one, an increase in newly discovered unpredictable comets and asteroids headed towards the Earth, which are thrown out of their normal orbits by Planet X's gravitational field as it approaches, which has already started to happen as dozens of previously unknown asteroids have been spotted recently, with only a few days warning before the nearing the Earth's orbit. Also see Revelation 8 through 11, that talks about this prophetically. Number 2, there'll be an increase in global earthquakes as the much larger Earth planet X approaches. It's 7 times bigger than the Earth, and therefore it pulls at the Earth's crust with ever-increasing intensity. And this, too, has already started to happen, as worldwide earthquakes have risen by 1,000% just over the last 10 years. See Matthew 24:7, which talks about specifically, out of Jesus' mouth, there'll be an increase in earthquakes at the very end of time. And that's happening tenfold already in the last 10 years. I believe caused by the approaching Planet X, which is also biblical fulfillment, because God controls all the movement of all the stars and planets like the clockwork inside a grandfather clock that he built and he programmed. Number 3, upcoming disastrous meteor showers. I had a dream about this. You can check a previous video. I was shown a map of our solar system with meteor storm heading toward the Earth, and this is caused as the Earth passes twice through Planet X's debris field of millions of accompanying asteroids. See Revelation 6:13, that talks about the stars falling from the sky like ripe figs. Hailstones of up to 100 pounds falling from the sky as the Earth tilts on its axis temporarily by Planet X, causing Arctic air, which does not tilt, to suddenly appear atop warmer climates, resulting in the frigid, moist air instantaneously freezing and falling from the sky as massive sheets of ice. See Revelation 16:21, that says hailstones the size of 75 pounds fell from the sky in the last days. You see this? Science is saying this, and the Bible is saying the exact same thing. Number 5, worldwide tidal waves and coastal flooding caused by Planet X's approach and accompanying major earthquakes. Jesus said in Luke 21:25, men's hearts will be melting with fear because of the tossing and turning of the seas. Tidal waves. You see that? The moon is like 1/30th the size of Planet X, and it causes the tide to go up and down. So something 30 times bigger than that, it's going to cause the sea to toss and turn. Exactly what Jesus said out of his own mouth. It's also in Revelation 16:20. Number 6, an increase in solar flares as the sun's energy is magnetically drawn toward Planet X. See Revelation 16:9, that talks about people cursing the sun because of a plague. Number 7, economic collapse and food shortages, hence the sponsor right here. Remember this? My Patriot Emergency Food Supply. Number 7, economic collapse and food shortages caused by the lack of conventional distribution of food. You've been to the grocery store lately, right? And seen the bare shelves when this COVID thing started? 2/3 of the canned goods were gone. If you got this, you don't have to worry about that and fighting the crowds, right? And this is also caused by the subsequent disruption and destruction of bridges, railroads, and power grids because of the earthquakes. See Revelation 6:6, right? When there's all these earthquakes, bridges break, trusses break, right? And food cannot be delivered. Number 8, disease epidemics caused by the lack of sanitation due to the earthquake's destruction of important infrastructure. No plumbing, no toilets, no running water to stay clean. Therefore, disease epidemics. See Revelation 2:23, 6:8, and 18:8. Number 9, widespread war, resulting from all of the aforementioned escalating events as nations fight over dwindling resources. Right? Matthew 24:7, Jesus said there'll be an increase of wars. Isaiah says it will be neighbor against neighbor in the last days, fighting over things, stressed out. Number 10, martial law and domestic political unrest. When have we seen that lately? Due to fighting over resources at the local level. And there's the Isaiah scripture. And again, the Messiah said that all these things would immediately precede his return. There will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the sky. And on the earth, the distress, not of a few people, not of one nation, of nations, all nations, with perplexity, something that has never happened before to this degree, as the sea and the waves roar. you see, caused by increased tidal effects from Planet X. Men's hearts melting from fear and expectation of those things which are coming upon the whole earth, and the sign is in the sky. Do you see this? All the scientists say this is what will happen if a rogue planet comes near the earth, and it's exactly what the scriptures say as well. Then it says the heavens will be shaken. Luke 21:25 through 26. There'll be unusual weather patterns, summer and winter. Seen that somewhere? Unexplained deaths of thousands of land and sea animals as a rash of sinkholes and cracks in the ground, resulting in random gas pipeline explosions, bridge collapses, and train derailments. Isn't that starting to happen? An increase in volcanic eruptions, and most importantly, the Earth's magnetic North Pole is moving right now at 579 feet per day. All may be the result of rogue Planet X's increasing gravitational interaction as it steadfastly approaches the Earth. Just the magnetic poles changing, which they say could change at any hour now or 50 years from now, they're not sure. But when it does, this could dramatically disrupt all electrical power grids, which by itself would mean an end to traditional food and delivery worldwide. There's no electricity to pump gasoline into trucks to deliver the food, no refrigeration. It's the end of days here if that happens. Just that happening and nothing else. The Earth is not alone, by the way, in feeling these unprecedented effects in the solar system. The temperature, orbit, and luminosity of all the planets in the solar system have recently been dramatically altered. The pressure on the surface of Pluto has increased by 300%. Neptune's poles have completely reversed, as Earth's may be about to. Never before seen gigantic storms have been appearing on Uranus. The size of Saturn's rings have decreased by 20%. Jupiter's atmosphere is undergoing unprecedented changes in color and radiation. The polar ice caps on Mars have melted for the first time in human observation. The otherwise highly consistent 11-year solar cycle is becoming longer for the first time ever recorded. The sun's medium optical spectrum has changed from yellow to white. Time to do something. And the sun is emitting never before mugnatic particles. All of these unprecedented changes are simultaneously occurring right now on Earth and on every planet in our solar system. Yet few people know about all of this and the cataclysmic magnitude these events may have for everyone on the Earth in the near future. The rogue Planet X can be found numerous times in both secular and biblical history. The Sumerians, who predate the Egyptians, are often referred to as the first civilization, called this heavenly intruder. See, it has a comet-like orbit. It has a pattern that comes around, but, with a long distance between it, long time between it, which they observed has a comet-like repeatable pattern, which I just said, and they called it the planet Nibiru. The Hopi Indians called the same thing Kachina. The Bible refers to it as wormwood, perhaps, in Revelation 8:11. Astronomers in the know call it Nemesis, Tyche, Planet X, or sometimes Planet 7X. You might check out that website, planet7x.net, as it is estimated to be 7 times larger than the Earth, with 7 being a significant biblical number in End Times Book of Revelation. It is most accurately believed that this wandering planet visits our solar system about every 360 years, not the 3,600 years that was wrongly predicted by Zecharia Sitchin, who is said to have mistranslated the 0 or the 10th decimal point in his mistaken calculations. The idea that Planet X appears to traverse our solar system less frequently than it actually does may be due to the fact that it often arrives on the opposite side of the sun than planet Earth is located on at the time. Therefore, it was frequently unnoticed in past generations. Planet X's known previous passages, when it was on the same side of the sun as the Earth, are mentioned in the historical records of various ancient cultures: the Babylonian, the Egyptian, Roman, Maya, Aztec, Caltech, Iranian, Hebrew, Persian, Hindu, and Chinese. All of these have astronomical records of some mysterious object appearing in the sky and disappearing. Only the NASA record remains secretive to the public, allegedly not to cause global panic. Hear a world leader say that recently about COVID? They didn't want to cause global panic. Yeah, that's their excuse for being secretive and hoarding all the good information to protect theirs and nobody else's. Though the real reason may be to deliberately destroy the majority of the public whom they perceive as useless eaters. Planet X's previously passages, they correspond to Noah's flood, Sodom and Gomorrah's fire from heaven, the famine of Joseph, Joshua's battle with the meteor shower, and the time of Moses with the 10 plagues of Egypt, because at this same time, it is historically recorded that enormous earthquakes were devastating parts of China, while the Minoan civilization near Crete was destroyed by an enormous volcanic eruption, perhaps caused by Planet X's enormous gravitational effects. Today, it is believed by some Christian astronomers, check out planet7x.net, that wormwood will be God's chosen instrument for bringing about the long foretold end-time Great Tribulation, when it is said, "The heavens will be shaken, and the seas will roar, and men's hearts will melt with fear for what is coming upon the earth." Luke 21, 25, and 26. I believe that the false year 2000 computer meltdown, known as Y2K, and the following dud of the so-called Mayan 2012 apocalypse may have both been deliberate hoaxes orchestrated by the elite-controlled media in order to generate in the public the cognitive dissonance of the boy who cried wolf, specifically designed to discredit the coming reality of the approaching Planet X with its similar end-of-the-world scenarios. By intentionally building up two previous false cataclysmic events, both of which ended in a great disappointment, these media deceivers' intention may be for the citizens of the world not to believe the real impending doom when it is about to fall them, just like the boy who cried wolf story. I suspect the same may be true of the numerous false dates leaked out by clever CIA and NSA-run Planet X websites in order to discredit the actual impending reality. So they have people say, and you don't know who these internet people are. It's going to happen here. It's going to happen here. It doesn't happen. So you say, well, it's just not going to happen at all. That could be intentional for all we know. By repeatedly having date after date not come to fruition, I believe that these media manipulators hope to jade the public into discounting the actual seriousness of the approaching event, so as to catch them unaware, like a thief in the night, 1 Thessalonians 5:1 through 4, and thusly rid the world of those who they perceive as the inferior population due to their lack of preparedness for the coming global crisis. Yeah, remember this? Get ready. You might even equate the similarity of this to those who try to predict the second coming of the Messiah. Just because repeated specific forecasts of his return have proven to be unsuccessful, this does not mean that the Messiah is not coming in the future. Nonetheless, the same could be said of Planet X. The confusion and diversity of opinions regarding the book of Revelation is similar to the dividing camps of science versus religion in regard to the understanding of Planet X, with the true answer likely being found by incorporating both points of view. With the book of Revelation, there also appears to be two distinctive opinions, literal versus symbolic, as well as the choice between the events described therein having occurred before the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in AD 70 versus the opinion that the events described therein will occur in the last days right before the Messiah's return. Some argue wholeheartedly that the book of Revelation is either one or the other, symbolic or literal, or it all happened already, or no, it'll all happen at the end. What I propose is that the book of Revelation may be all these things. God is such an artist and a scientist simultaneously, with the depth of mind that is beyond human understanding, that it may be that the book of Revelation is both symbolic and literal at the same time, and that the events described therein did take place before the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in AD 70 and will take place again on a global scale at the end of the age. The book of Revelation may be symbolic and it also may be literal. It may have been fulfilled before 70 AD, and it may also be refulfilled worldwide in the last days. Has anyone ever considered this possibility? One of the most important, and listen to this one of the most important and underreported events in the entire history of the world, which is recorded in the ancient documents of numerous independent countries, though you have to dig for it, is the fact that prior to 705 BC, all of the advanced civilizations of the world, which had amazingly accurate calendars based on the Earth's rotation around the sun, they had very good astronomers. The Hebrews, the Mayans, the Egyptians, and the Chinese, they all recorded that the Earth's orbital year around the sun prior to 705 BC was exactly 360 days, not the 365 and a quarter day year which we have now. By the way, this is also quite a testimony of a divine creator, because each month has precisely 30 days, like a meticulously designed clockwork. This is where the 360 degrees on a compass came from, whose pattern came from this original solar year. And then around 705 BC, literally overnight, all of the above separated cultures immediately and simultaneously changed all of their independent calendars to a 365 and a quarter day year. The question is, how could the Earth's year, the number of days it needs to go around the sun, change from 360 days to 365 days overnight? Around 705 BC, the scriptures record in 2 Kings 28 through 2011 that the prophet Isaiah asked God for a sign that he would fulfill his promise of a divine healing of King Hezekiah. The requested sign was for the shadow of their version of a sundial to go the opposite direction their normal. Now, their sundial was actually a stairway built to precisely calculate the hours of the day based on the degree to which the sun's shadow fell upon the increasing or decreasing steps, presumably 1 step per hour, not the traditional circular sundial. In order to accomplish this requested miracle, rather than the Earth having to stop and rotate in the other direction and then go back, as would be required with a traditional circular sundial, it being the steps instead, which is actually how it was historically, the Earth would instead have to tilt on its axis temporarily. And many researchers now believe this is precisely what happened in 705 BC due to, quote, a cosmic freak of nature. Well, what does that mean? What cosmic freak of nature can basically pull the Earth further away from the sun, causing the extra time it takes to go around? And this was the very same time in this Bible, right? The scripture is 2 Kings 28, when it recorded that the sundial or the sun steps went backwards. That's the very same year that the Earth changed from its original 360 days. Do you see that happening? Both in science, which can be proven by all the calendars around the world changing at that very moment that the Bible records that event. You see that? That's when Planet X came by before. As you can see from an amazing recent Weather Channel documentary about rogue planets, which is Planet X, which is right when I'm finished speaking, it's going to start. Be sure to watch that. 200 billion rogue planets minimum may be free floating in our home galaxy. Those are just roaming planets. That's what Planet X is, a rogue planet, and they're saying there's at least 200 billion of them in our galaxy. This is potentially twice the number of planets estimated to be orbiting stars. As mentioned previously and described in this film, if such a rogue planet, Planet X, were to just come relatively far away from the Earth, somewhere between Saturn and Jupiter, or about 600 million miles away, it would still pull Jupiter further away from the sun, which would in turn pull the Earth further away from the sun, which is what would cause the aforementioned catastrophic events. And I believe this is exactly what happened in 705 BC, that the Earth was pulled further away from the sun by the regularly passing, 7 times larger than the Earth, rogue Planet X, which now causes the Earth to take an extra 5.25 days to orbit the sun than it previously did because of the newly increased distance from it. as Planet X is nicknamed Lucifer by the Vatican, or the biblical destroyer, you can now see the divine symbolism here of the rogue, you see, rebellious, like Satan, planet, named after the rogue, rebellious devil, which destroyed the indisputable proof of divine creation, and that prior to this time, the earth had 12 equal months, one for each tribe of Israel, all of which lasted exactly 30 days, with a 360-day year, prior to Lucifer planet destroying the testimony of God's clockwork creation. That's why there's 360 degrees on a compass. This is, you see, this undeniable fingerprint of planetary precision was originally absolute proof of divine creation. I mean, imagine if that's right now. Every month is exactly 30 days, and there's 12 of them. I mean, you would say that's not an accident, right? But now, 1 month is 31 days, 1 month is 29, you see? But before, there was a testimony to all that this was put in place by divine intelligence. And planet Lucifer, you see, destroyed that. I believe God let that happen as a testimony, a story, an astronomical account, a parable of how the devil came down and started to destroy the earth. You see that? Now, because of this symbolic and literal devilish destruction, the lunar and solar calendars no longer synchronize, with each month varying in length, as planet Lucifer destroyed God's mathematical planetary testimony of precise divine creation. I believe that in the first age of the earth, God allowed or even orchestrated Planet X as a heavenly representation of Satan to destroy his important testimony of divine creation as a lesson to us, just as the Messiah allowed himself to be destroyed as a symbolic lesson for all of mankind of the destructive nature of rebellion against God, which started with Lucifer, and that's why the Vatican named this telescope the Lucifer Telescope Planet X, which destroyed the 30-day month and will come again to bring the end-time tribulation. And it's a symbolic of God. God allows this. It's all representation of the fall of the angels and the fall of man destroying his creation. So I believe the Creator may use Planet X, just like he did in the first stage, one more time at the last stage of the earth, to bring about the much-needed rebuke of rebellious mankind and his rebellious fallen angel, Planet Lucifer, who led all mankind into doing the same rebellion. This planetary event of 705 BC is concrete, scientific, historical, and scriptural proof that a rogue planet, Planet X, has indeed passed near the Earth before, with severe global consequences. I think if it's pulling the entire planet further away from the sun, I would call that severe global consequences. And if it does it again, it's going to get worse when we're further away from the sun than we are now. And it could be even pull it more further away from the sun and tilt the earth even more. If it happened in the past, it can happen again, and it may happen again in the near future. And that's why they keep taking down these videos about Planet X, keep posting articles about it and removing them and never mentioning the subject ever again. Because of these discoveries, the highly respected scientists at the Weather Channel, virtually overnight, have turned Planet X from being the craziest of all conspiracy theories into one that is entirely logical and possible. So be sure to watch this documentary that's coming up. It lays it out so eloquently. That's why they took it down. As far as I know, this is the only version of it on the internet. Even the scriptural book of Isaiah, listen to this, which also prophesies about the last days of judgment, says this: the earth will be moved out of its place. Isn't that interesting? Isaiah 13:13. Unlucky number there. It is clear through numerous presidential executive orders pertaining to a future scenario of a worldwide disaster, as well as the United States government buying up all available ammunition for, quote, homeland security, enough to shoot all 300 million Americans 6 times each. all the while arming local police with automatic assault rifles and armored vehicles. All of this preparation indicates that the U.S. governmental authorities are preparing for a catastrophe that will result in martial law. Now, people assume that this will commence because of economic or political instability. While this may be partially true, the question is what actually is the root cause of this strange government catastrophic planning. By the way, there's been so many executive orders from Bush, from Obama, and now with Trump that talk about the government taking over everything, taking over the railroad, even forcing people to work. I thought slavery was illegal. All these emergency powers, when you see your neighbor putting on, his raincoat and rain boots and umbrella, even though it's sunny, you may think, a storm is coming. And they have been buying up ammunition and doing all these executive orders having to do with, the succession of power down 12 steps down to like the triple undersecretary of agriculture becomes president. Why would they be planning all of these, taking over, the agriculture, taking over the water supply, taking over schools, unless they're preparing for some emergency? And if the president isn't going to tell us about COVID, they're certainly not going to tell us about Planet X if they're afraid to tell us about a simple virus going around. My sources are telling me that the recent rash of mass deaths of fish and birds are coming from the increase in minor underground earthquakes, which are imperceivable to the public and are caused by the gravitational influence of this large approaching heavenly body, which then release underwater and underground methane gas. I didn't know that, which in turn kills these animals. That's why they're dying off. It's these miniature earthquakes releasing methane gas in the air and the sea and the land. We don't perceive it, but they're in nature, and then they all drop dead. It's from those little earthquakes as Planet X potentially is approaching. I'm also told that Planet X is the reason why many comets and asteroids are being discovered with so little advance warning. There'll even be a link to a CNN video saying the exact same thing one time years ago, that the only copy of it is when someone filmed it off of their smartphone, off of their TV. It says Planet X is causing the barrage of comets. It's out on the outer solar system. They say it word for word. Even CNN said it one time. Oops. You can't ever find it except off of someone's cell phone, filming it off the TV. If that still is up there, it'll be linked in the description of this video. You can watch it for yourself. I'm not making this stuff up. Wish I was. And that Planet X is also causing numerous comets and asteroids. That's why we're having so many, because Planet X, as it comes in, gravity actually pushes a gravitational wave, pushes things out of their normal orbit ahead of itself as it comes toward the Earth. Now, just as President Eisenhower waited until the very last day, this is very important, listen to this. President Eisenhower waited until the very last day of his presidency to speak his mind about the corruptive depravity of the United States government. The last day he was in office, likely to evade assassination by the power elite of whom he critically spoke, who indeed assassinated his successor when he likewise critically spoke. So he knew they could do that, and sure enough, they did it on the next president because he spoke while in office. Janet Napolitano, playing it safe. She was the outgoing director of Homeland Security. The day she retired, said some very startling and alarming words, just like Eisenhower did in his farewell speech, about an upcoming national calamity. This is reported by ABC News, okay? She said the following, word for word. Listen to this. A natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is likely on its way. Let me say that again. At the day she retired, last little bit of warning so she won't get in trouble. It's her last day. She said, outgoing Homeland Security Secretary, a natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is likely on its way. What exactly does that mean? What natural disaster has never before been seen in the United States and can also be predicted years in advance? Cannot be a hurricane, earthquake, volcano, tornado, flood, or blizzard, because we have seen all of these before and they cannot be predicted in advance. The only disaster that comes to mind is an unprecedented natural disaster that is predictable years in advance. Is the only thing that fits those two is a catastrophe coming from outer space. The only one of these that I know of are a devastating comet, asteroid, magnetic pole change, or a newly discovered large rogue planet that is heading towards the Earth. These are the only natural disasters that Americans have never before seen that can be known about in advance. Additionally, and more importantly, we should note that the only catastrophe from outer space, like a rogue planet or comet, can be predicted in advance due to their calculable trajectories. As Napolitano clearly stated, it is on its way. Do you see that? Because of the geometry, right, of the comets and planets and their movement, you could predict them hundreds of years in advance, thousands of years in advance. If it's all math. It's a natural disaster. The United States has never before seen it, and it can be predicted in advance. That has to be something coming from outer space. Comet, asteroid, rogue planet, something like that. Again, the candid top government official recently said, right before she left office on her last day as Homeland Security Director, a natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is likely on its way. Do you see why now the government has been preparing over the past few years for implementing martial law? As I discussed in a video I made in September of 2016, 4 years ago, which is linked in the description underneath the Planet X film at the end of this article, I warned my fellow Americans that the United States government was preparing to lock down the country under disguise of a pandemic quarantine. Yes, I said in 2016 that they were planning on having a pandemic quarantine because they were writing all these laws that gave them permission to do it. That means they're planning on doing it. You see that? I think COVID is real, just like tigers, but it's not hiding around every corner. You know what I mean? And so I think this is a dress rehearsal. Do people submit? Will people follow rules? Will they do this and do that? How much are they going to resist martial law? Let's turn up that heat on that frog another step. See what they take. I think this whole COVID thing this time is really a drill. But they're not telling us. The president himself said, I'm not telling the public what's going on, right? While some may argue that without effort on their part, the Lord will take care of them in time of crisis, the method through which the Lord may take care of you during this coming calamity may be the foreknowledge of such impending cataclysmic events. The book of the minor prophets at the end of the Old Testament, as well as the book of Revelation, appear to have been written to prepare God's people for the last days and its great tribulation. Now listen to what God said out of his own mouth in Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. This is why the government is keeping this a secret. They want to get rid of us. They have the Georgia Guidestones saying the earth should only have 500 million people. That means 7.5 billion of us got to get lost. Even the book of Revelation says that half the world's population, first a quarter of it, and then a third of what's left, which ends up being half the population, will be destroyed and killed. That way they don't have to be a genocidal maniac. They're going to let Planet X do it for them in their minds, and that's why they're keeping it a secret, because they want to get rid of us. That's why they're building bunkers in the ground. Sound familiar? Now go back to preparation here, right? Remember, getting ready for this? Is God going to take care of you? Well, how did he take care of people in the past from such calamities? How was Joseph and his family protected from the 7 years of famine and tribulation in ancient Israel? Some think the coming tribulation is 7 years. Some say it's 3.5. Either one, it's going to be very hard. Now, during that time, this example in the Bible, my minister, Pastor Santos, said what is kind of regional, in the Old Testament, that's an example for the last days, which that example will be worldwide. So look at this. How was Joseph and his family protected from the 7 years of famine and tribulation in ancient Israel? Did God drop food from the sky every day for 7 years for them to eat? No. God gave Joseph foreknowledge of the terrible events to come. And then Joseph acted on the information accordingly, right? Got his food together ahead of time. Like, wouldn't be a bad idea, right? He stockpiled food for himself and his family. Just read it. In order to survive the coming crisis. Yes, wise Joseph was a prepper. God took care of him by telling him future events, and he prepared for it. He stored up food for 7 years. So during the 7 years of famine, he had food, right? That's the way God took care of him, by telling him in advance what was going to happen. He didn't drop food from the sky. So maybe God will do that for you, or maybe God is telling you, get ready. You heard the warning. Whether you act upon it or not is up to you. You can read about this in Genesis 41, verses 15 through 37. So in my opinion, it wouldn't hurt to purchase and tuck away a few extra canned goods, batteries, bottled water, and toiletries. You have a spare tire for your cart, right? Even though a flat is probably a 1 in 1,000 chance, right? You're prepared for that. Better to have something and not need it than to need something and not have it. As the Terminator said in movie 3, Judgment Day is inevitable. I've been researching the topic of Planet X for about 20 years, and as more and more information comes to light, it appears more and more likely that it may very well be true. You have been informed. What you do with the information is up to you. Read Ezekiel 33, 1 through 5. While the exact time of the return of the Messiah is unknown, what we do know is that a great time of trouble, unequaled in all of world history, will precede his arrival. Accordingly, you might want to prepare your house and especially your soul. Let me end with this scripture here in Luke 21, 25 through 28, and be sure to keep watching. Go back to your screens and watch this amazing documentary about rogue planets, Planet X, produced by the Weather Channel themselves. Jesus said, there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and the stars, with distress of all the nations on the entire earth. The ocean's wave will be roaring everywhere. Men's hearts will fail them with paralyzing fear and dread of those things which are coming upon the whole earth, as the entire heavens will be violently shaken. After this, all the world will see the Messiah coming down from the sky in a great cloud with tremendous power and great glory. When you see these things begin to happen, lift up your head and earnestly look up. Because if you turn to God, repent of your sin, and keep doing it to the end, you will be saved. It's a promise from God. You'll get eternal life. This life means nothing. Everyone's going to die, no matter how rich you are. I put my thoughts, my actions into the next life, which lasts forever, not this one that is ending for everybody. Now, here's the Planet X film. Buckle up. Get ready to watch this incredible documentary, and then be sure to check out the links in the description of this video, and be sure to click on my Patriot Supply link. If you buy this food, I'll get a little commission from it. And stay tuned. Here is the important documentary about Planet X. I love you all. Continue to watch.
Renaissance astronomers describe the solar system as a giant clockwork mechanism in which a series of cosmic interlocking gears determine the movements of the planets. But we now know that the orbits of the planets are not as fixed as they appear.
It seems so steady. It seems like it is this clockwork, but there are ways in which it can be disrupted quite dramatically.
Even a slight change in the Earth's orbit could severely impact our ability to survive, since the position of our home planet makes it uniquely suited for life.
The Earth seems to be an ideal planet in terms of habitability because it lies at just the right distance from the sun, in which point liquid water can be stable on our surface. We can have oceans and lakes and rivers, and we think that water is really the key ingredient for life.
Earth is in that special zone. It's not too cold, nor too hot, it's just right. If we were closer to the sun, we might end up like Venus, a planet too hot to live on, with a temperature hot enough to melt lead. On the other hand, if we were farther away, we might be more like Mars, which is just ridiculously cold, and you can't support life when you're too far from the sun.
But what would happen if Earth's delicate balance were disturbed, so that it was no longer this perfect distance from the sun? Far beyond our solar system, there are planets wandering through the galaxy, not bound to the gravity of any star. Known as rogue planets, they were ejected from their birthplace by unstable orbits or cosmic collisions and sent on wild trajectories through the universe.
Essentially, a rogue planet is a planet that was originally in a different star system, and it was kicked out and is now wandering the cosmos, divorced from its parent star.
There's likely to be at least as many planets as there are stars. So we expect there's something like 100 billion stars in our galaxy, and so we expect a couple 100 billion of these rogue planets.
These rogue planets are interstellar nomads, cold, devoid of life, and careening through the darkest reaches of space. And many of them are likely to be giants, hundreds of times larger than Earth.
Right now, we're seeing more so-called Jupiter-sized planets than others. Based on that, you could expect an average rogue planet to be on the order of a Jupiter-sized planet, maybe less.
With billions of rogue planets in our galaxy, it's possible that one could swing through our solar system with monumental effects.
A rogue planet coming into the solar system will probably be moving at hundreds of miles per second.
It's possible that a rogue planet could hit the Earth directly, completely demolishing our planet. But a rogue planet would not even have to get near the Earth to create havoc.
The nightmare scenario is that one of these large rogue planets drifts right through our solar system and ends up disturbing the orbit of one or more of the larger planets. And because these larger planets like Jupiter actually help shepherd the inner planets, it ends up elongating the inner planets' orbits, which would dramatically change things for life on Earth.
It's almost like taking a baseball bat to the Earth, the rogue planet being the bat, and just the force from this planet will be so great that you just change the path of the Earth just in the same way that a bat can change the path of the baseball on its way to the catcher's glove.
And if Earth's orbit were elongated just enough to swing outside the habitable zone, our very survival could be at stake.
The habitable zone, as we understand it in any star system, is defined by what we call the triple point of water. You find water in all three phases: liquid, solid, and gas. And as so far as we know, you need that in order for life to be able to survive. And when you start making Earth's orbit more elliptical, you start touching the fringes of this habitable zone where it could be a little warm for all three phases or a little cool for all three phases. We're still there, but it doesn't take much to shove a planet's climate over the edge and either make it a super hot Venus or lead it to a very cold Mars.
Since there has never been an encounter with a rogue planet in recorded history, scientists are unsure of how the event would play out.
So we really can't know with great certainty what is going to happen if a rogue planet comes into our solar system. We can run computer models, we can make educated guesses, but at this point it's a purely hypothetical phenomenon.
Here is one possible scenario. A rogue planet suddenly appears on the fringes of our solar system. As the rogue streaks past the outer planets, the whole solar system begins to change. The rogue's gravitational pull alters the orbit of Jupiter. Jupiter, in turn, pulls the Earth out of its nearly circular orbit to an elliptical orbit.
If it passed near the Earth, then the Earth's orbit would be changed almost instantaneously.
This new orbit takes the Earth as close to the Sun as Venus and as far out as Mars. Although we still remain in the habitable zone in this new elliptical orbit, our climate would begin to alter drastically. For most, the change is so gradual that at first, it's hardly noticed. The days grow longer and the nights get colder, but life goes on as before. But over the next few months, a slow-motion global disaster begins to unfold.
There's a common misconception that the Earth's seasons are driven by our distance either toward or away from the sun, where summer is when the Earth is closest to the sun and winter is when it's farthest away. That's not true. Right now, it's the Earth's tilt that causes summer and winter. So when your side of the planet's facing toward the sun, it's summer. And when your side of the planet's facing away, it's winter.
the entire planet would have summer at the same time because it's very close to the sun, and then the entire planet then experiences winter at the same time when you're farthest away from the sun.
So the Earth would enter a new climate phase where you would have short but intense summers and then very long winters.
So life on Earth is very much dependent on the orbit we are in around the sun.
The shift in our seasons would wreak havoc on Earth's agriculture, resulting in a shorter growing period and eventually mass food shortages.
The effect could be very dramatic and really affect the prospects of life on Earth. If we're very unlucky, it could end life on Earth.
As the climate catastrophe continues, the Earth struggles to adapt, and the worst is yet to come. Imagine that a rogue planet has suddenly passed through our solar system and alters the Earth's orbit. A new elliptical path draws us closer to the sun, and a climate catastrophe ensues. World temperatures would increase dramatically. Runaway global warming causes ice caps and glaciers to melt, raising the sea levels around the world by 3 feet or more.
Now, 3 or 4 feet of sea level rise may not seem like a lot. Let's think about Lower Manhattan, New York City. It's protected by a seawall, which is about 5 feet high at average tide. And at high tide, the tide is about 2 feet below the top of that seawall. Now, if you're adding 3 or 4 feet on top of that, now you've got the ocean in New York City, in the subway system, and the financial district without a storm even being present.
With just a few feet of sea level rise, you have a lot of problems because most of the major cities of the world are built on or near the ocean. And they're designed with infrastructure such as subway systems, for example, or sewer systems that are not designed to handle more than a foot or two of sea level rise. And so when you have those first few feet, it causes major costs. But then when you go beyond that, you're talking about cities literally disappearing off the map. But if we warm the planet significantly more, let's say 10 degrees, then you're talking about all of Greenland and all of Antarctica melting. When they're all melted, you're going to have 250 feet of sea level rise, which is literally wiping most of the major cities off the map totally.
With much of the coastal areas flooded, hundreds of millions of people would be forced to move inland, away from the ocean and the rising temperatures.
Basically, all the habitable areas as they are now would tend to shift away from this increasingly hot equatorial region up north to preserve the way of life as we have it.
The migration would tax life support systems and stretch government infrastructures around the world to the breaking point.
One of the biggest impacts that a big climate change or a shift like that would cause is agriculture would stop. Food is effectively governed by a seasonal pattern that we take for granted. And if that goes away, then you can imagine a scenario where we don't have enough food to feed the population, economy breaks down, and that would actually become more dangerous to society than the actual climate change that we would experience.
But the worst is not over. Environmental effects from a rogue planet would continue to be felt across the globe.
It wouldn't be just one area of the planet which would be affected by these sorts of phenomena. The whole planet would suffer during the summertime when the planet was closest to the sun. You'd have incredible heat waves, incredible droughts over the entire planet.
More areas become arid, with large sand and dust storms blanketing cities and making it dangerous for people to leave their houses.
You might find entire populations walking outside with respirators on all the time just because it's so dusty.
And temperatures of 140 degrees would threaten our very survival.
Once the temperature reaches 130 degrees, you can't survive that. You can't sweat fast enough to cool your body. And if you're outside without air conditioning, then you're just going to die.
And with the Earth's orbit altered and the planet closer to the sun, deadly wildfires are just a lightning strike away. Massive firestorms would devastate thousands of square miles of forests and grasslands.
you're going to have problems not only with drought, you're also going to have wildfires, because any vegetation that's cooking in that kind of heat is going to be highly dried out and subject to bursting into flame.
But it's not just extreme heat that threatens us. It's also the cold, a new ice age, as the catastrophe continues. Imagine the gravitational impact of a rogue planet has altered the Earth's orbit, causing it to be much more elliptical. This shift would have a drastic effect on the weather. Runaway, supercharged global warming, leading to floods, droughts, widespread wildfires, and extreme swings in temperature. Ironically, the global warming caused by the new altered orbit could cause certain areas to freeze over.
One of the big misconceptions about global warming is that every place on the planet gets hotter all at once. Well, that's not true. The climate system is much more complex than that. So when you add more heat to the system, there are all sorts of feedback mechanisms that start to kick in. Like when you heat the water, it becomes water vapor. Well, water vapor makes clouds, and clouds reflect all the sunlight back to space. Well, that is going to have a cooling effect. So it's very likely that you could have areas of the Earth get much colder while other areas get much hotter. One potential effect of global warming is that Britain ices over. You have a new ice age at the same time that you get massive droughts in the US.
Some scientists fear that global warming could also lead to a shutdown of the thermohaline circulation, a giant conveyor belt that distributes warm and cold water around the globe.
Think of it as a tractor in the ocean that's carrying cold water from the Arctic and forcing warm water up from the tropics. And what that does is it cools down the equatorial region and heats up the Arctic.
Now, if that circulation were to change because of the substantial differences in Earth's orbit, then you would have a situation where Europe would have a much different climate, and North America as well, because a lot of heat gets transported by ocean currents.
A shutdown of the thermohaline circulation could accelerate global warming as the polar ice caps continue to melt. Very cold air mixes with warmer air. Tropical storms could become stronger, and more frequent superstorms would be born. The constantly hot equatorial zone will produce more water vapor in the air, which could lead to larger and more frequent cyclones and hurricanes.
That's going to cause flooding when you do happen to have a situation where you've got rain falling. So both drought and storms are going to get worse with a very hot planet like that.
And if ocean temperatures were to rise above 115 degrees Fahrenheit, we could face a special breed of superstorm called a hypercane.
Now, that is a type of hurricane/tornado that gets to a wind speed of 500 miles per hour. It's been theoretically shown that if you heat up a large enough area of the ocean, say maybe 50 or 100 miles in diameter, to a temperature of 115 degrees, you could get one of these theoretical storms that go way up in the upper stratosphere and cause incredible destruction wherever they hit. A hypercane you could think of as a tornado on steroids or a hurricane on steroids, kind of a cross between the two, much more powerful than either, which would destroy any structure in its way.
This climate catastrophe projection might seem like a worst-case scenario. But if a rogue planet did alter the Earth's orbit, many scientists believe we would have something much bigger to fear. It's possible that the Earth itself could become a rogue planet.
The Earth's orbit would change by a larger and larger amount, and the Earth might eventually get ejected from the solar system and become a rogue planet itself.
The Earth itself wouldn't be destroyed, it would remain intact. But as we went farther and farther away from the sun, the surface would cool and the atmosphere would freeze, and if we had any chance of survival, we would have to dig down into or toward the mantle where the radioactive elements are keeping the Earth's core hot, and we would become subsurface dwellers in order to survive. To us on Earth, it would look like the nights would get longer and longer, the days would get fainter, till eventually it's perpetual night. and the sun becomes just a bright star in the starry night sky, and that's it for the rest of time.
These doomsday scenarios may seem like the stuff of science fiction, but with billions of rogue planets wandering through space, the threat is real. Luckily, scientists around the world are developing the tools necessary to spot these rogue planets long before they arrive in our solar system.
Disasters have wiped out the planet before.
We know that these things are a threat. We know they're going to hit again.
Nothing lasts forever. Forecasting the end. Next on the Weather Channel.
What if a rogue planet streaks through the solar system and pulls the Earth into an elliptical orbit, causing an environmental disaster? This new orbit would generate extreme weather events that threaten the very survival of the human race. In an attempt to combat this potential catastrophe, scientists are scanning the skies in hopes of detecting these rogue planets before they become a threat.
We use mainly two telescopes, one for the discovery itself. It has a very good wide field capability.
This telescope, known as the CFH, or the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope, is located atop the summit of Mauna Kea in Hawaii and is one of the most advanced of its kind in the world.
And then for the spectroscopy, we went to the VLT. So that's really a cutting-edge telescope. Then you see the chemical composition. So we're not just seeing a little point moving, we're seeing really the composition of the object.
These VLTs, or very large telescopes, consist of 4 individual scopes and operate at both visual and infrared wavelengths. They are capable of detecting objects 4 billion times fainter than can be seen by the naked eye.
So these are really massive telescopes, and they gather data, and then you spend a lot of time, usually years, analyzing the data.
Etienne and his team have been successful in finding hundreds of rogue planets, but one planet in particular stands out among the rest.
So this planet was discovered as we were looking for failed stars. It's about the same diameter as Jupiter, so a bit more than 10 times the size of the Earth.
We didn't know if there were other planets out there or if planets were common. Now we know that planets are common, and we've found more than 800 with a possibility of 2,000 now, and that number is only going to get bigger as our telescopes get better.
In principle, a rogue planet could enter our solar system, and if it does enter and if it comes close, then it disrupts the orbit. Of course, it can have catastrophic impacts, ultimately to wipe out the biosphere.
Fortunately, astronomers have yet to spot any rogue planets headed our way. Our ever-evolving technological advancements and understanding of space has also shown us how delicate the balance of life really is, and that our orbit, at least for now, is in a perfect position.
Here in the 21st century, we live in kind of a Goldilocks zone for life on Earth. It's not too hot or too cold here. So let's work on keeping us right in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want to move too far on either side. It's not so good for civilization and life on Earth.